What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We're starting off 2025 with 3 cases of scorned lovers and or love triangles gone wrong. Our first case is that of Betty Broderick. Here we go. Betty Broderick is an American woman who murdered her ex-husband, Daniel T. Broderick III, on November 5th of 1989. Betty committed the murder as an act of revenge after Daniel left her and divorced her. At a second trial that began on December 11th of 1991, she was convicted of 2 counts of second-degree murder and later sentenced to 32 years to life in prison. She grew up in Bronxville, New York, one of 6 children of a large Catholic family, and stated that her parents, from very early childhood, were basically raising her to be a good Catholic housewife, as that was the most important thing she could do with her life. So, starting off great there, folks. She would go to college to get a degree in early childhood education through an accelerated program, and did meet her husband, Daniel, at school. In 1965, Betty met her future husband, Dan Broderick, at the University of Notre Dame. Dan was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and was also part of a large Irish Catholic family whose parents had a similar outlook to Betty's family. They met at a dance at Notre Dame. He was 21 years old and a medical student, and at 17 years old, Betty was pursuing her degree at the College of St. Mary's. This is quoted from Betty. Dan never once wavered from his goal of making me his wife. He would wait. He would do and say whatever was necessary, even agreeing with me when he didn't, and doing things I wanted to do when he didn't, until he had me. Nobody ever used the terms obsessive-compulsive or stalker back then, but that is what he was. The couple would marry on April 12th of 1969 in the Immaculate Conception Church in Tuckahoe, New York. Betty returned from the honeymoon pregnant with their first child. Their daughter Kim was born in 1970. Betty would give birth to 4 more children. After Kim's birth, Dan completed his MD degree. He then announced his intention to combine his medical expertise with a JD degree and enrolled at Harvard Law School. Betty was the main provider for the family, while Dan attended law school with the help of a student loan. Dan was quickly hired by a law firm in San Diego and moved his family to the San Diego community of La Jolla. Betty continued working part-time, often selling Tupperware or Avon products while raising the children. In the fall of 1982, Dan hired 21-year-old Dutch-American Linda Kolkena, a former Delta Airlines flight attendant, to be his legal assistant. this time, Dan Broderick had become a prominent local lawyer, serving as the president of the San Diego Bar Association. Betty claimed that Dan made it extremely difficult for her to find a lawyer willing to represent her in the divorce, which put her at a distinct disadvantage. Betty also believed that Dan used his legal influence to win sole custody of their children, sell their home against her wishes, and cheat her out of her rightful share of his income. The divorce was finalized in 1989, 4 years after Dan filed the petition. Betty's behavior became increasingly erratic. She left hundreds of profane messages on Dan's answering machine and ignored numerous restraining orders that forbade her from setting foot on Dan's property. She vandalized his new home and even drove her car into his front door, despite the fact that their children were inside the house at the time. On April 22nd, 1989, Dan and Linda were married. Linda had been concerned about Betty's behavior and even urged Dan to wear a bulletproof vest to their wedding. However, Betty did not arrive, and the wedding proceeded without incident. After the wedding, Betty claimed that Linda taunted her by mailing her facial cream and slimming treatment ads. 8 months after buying a Smith & Wesson revolver, and 7 months after Dan and Linda were married, Betty Broderick drove to Dan's house in the Marston Hills neighborhood near Balboa Park in San Diego. Betty used a key she had taken from her daughter, Kim, to enter the house while the couple slept, whereupon she shot and killed them. The murders occurred at 5:30 a.m. on November 5th of 1989, 2 days before Betty's 42nd birthday. 2 bullets hit Linda in the head and chest, killing her instantly. 1 bullet hit Dan in the chest as he apparently was reaching for the phone. 1 bullet hit the wall, and 1 bullet hit the nightstand. Dan was 17 days shy of his 45th birthday, and Linda was 28 at the time of her death. Naughty, naughty there, Dan. Evidence was presented at her trial that Betty had removed a phone answering machine from Dan's bedroom so that he could not call for help. Medical evidence indicated that Dan had not died right away, and Betty claimed that she had spoken to him after she had shot him. After contacting her daughter, and this would be her daughter Lee, not Kim, and Lee's boyfriend, Betty turned herself into the police, never denying that she had pulled the trigger. Betty's explanation at both trials was that she never planned to kill Dan and Linda, and that her crime was not premeditated. Come on now. Her account of the murders at her second trial was that she was startled by Linda screaming, "Call the police," and immediately fired the gun. Linda and Dan are listed as having been buried together at Greenwood Memorial Park in San Diego. Criminal defense attorney Jack Early represented Betty at trial. Gary Wells prosecuted for the state of California. Betty's defense was that she had been a battered wife, claiming that she was driven over the edge by years of psychological, physical, and mental abuse at the hands of her ex-husband. Wells portrayed Broderick as a murderer who planned and schemed to kill her ex-husband and argued jury that Betty was not a battered woman. Forensic psychiatrist and criminologist Dr. Park Dietz for the prosecution used the analysis of Dr. Melvin Goldsband, who previously worked on the case for the prosecution. Dietz said that Betty had a history of narcissistic personality disorder and likewise diagnosed Betty as severely narcissistic, and clinical psychologist Catherine DeFrancesca testified for the defense, concluded that Betty was with narcissistic features. The lead detective in the case was Terry D. Gelder of San Diego Homicide, who provided testimony for the prosecution. Broderick's first trial ended with a hung jury when 2 of the jurors held out for manslaughter, citing lack of intent. A mistrial was declared. Betty Broderick was retried a year later with the same defense attorney and prosecutor. The second trial was essentially a replay of the first trial. Prosecutor Wells was successful the second time around. The jury returned a verdict of 2 counts of second-degree murder. Broderick was sentenced to 2 consecutive terms of 15 years to life, plus 2 years for illegal use of a firearm, the maximum under the law. She has been incarcerated since the day she committed the murders. Betty is serving her sentence at the California Institution for Women in Chino, California. In January of 2010, her first request for parole was denied by the Board of Parole Hearings because she did not show remorse and did not acknowledge wrongdoing. She was denied parole in November of 2011 and again in January of 2017. She will not be eligible again until January of 2032, at which date she will be 84 years old. Y'all, she was pissed. Her husband left her for a much younger woman, took their kids, and said, "You're not getting any of my money." I guess she didn't show any remorse, so when she went up for parole, that lady did not give a shit. Alright, our second case is Diane Zamora. Diane Zamora is a former United States Naval Academy midshipman and convicted murderer who in 1995 murdered Adrian Jessica Jones, who she believed was a romantic rival for her ex-fiancé and accomplice David Graham. Graham confessed to giving Adrian a ride home and having sex with her 1 month earlier, leading an enraged Zamora to demand that he kill Jones. In the early morning of December 4th of 1995, Graham picked up Jones in Zamora's car while she hid in the hatchback. They went to a remote location and got into a struggle, at which point Zamora hit Jones over the head with weights and Graham shot her twice after she broke away from them. Following the murder, Graham attended the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado, while Zamora attended the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. Zamora confessed to the crime to her roommates, which ultimately led to notification of the local police in Texas, where the murder occurred. Both Zamora and Graham were arrested on September 6th of 1996. They were both convicted in separate trials and are currently serving life sentences. Zamora's attorney filed an appeal in 2005, stating the prosecution withheld the information astronaut, and Graham wanted to be a pilot. The two began dating about 4 years later in August of 1995, when they were both high school honor students. Zamora, a student at Crowley High School, and Graham was a student at Mansfield High School. About a month after they began dating, Zamora and Graham announced their engagement to their families. They planned to marry after their college graduations. Graham went to school with Adrian Jones, who was on the cross-country track team with him. Jones, known to our acquaintances as AJ, was also an honor student who planned to attend Texas A&M University and become a behavioral analyst. Jones's family included her mother Linda, her father Bill, and 2 brothers. Graham claimed that on November 4th of 1995, he had given Jones a ride home from a regional meet, and that during the ride he stopped the car to have sex with her. During her confession to police, Zamora said that she believed it was this night when Graham came over to her house, carrying a stuffed animal and having this look in his eyes that was horrible. He looked so scared. In Zamora's confession, she stated that about a month later she questioned Graham about other girls, including Adrian Jones. They got into a fight when he pressed her to study for the SAT. Graham then said that he had not only had sex with her, but also had sex with Adrian the same night. Zamora began screaming and hitting her head against the floor, shouting, "Kill her! Kill her!" She said that beginning December 2nd, they tried to get in touch with Adrian, and Graham continually tried to calm Zamora down. Graham claimed in 2008 that Zamora told him that she would kill herself or leave him if he did not kill Adrian Jones. Although they were both goal-driven and intelligent, Zamora and Graham each had issues beneath the surface, no shit, that were reflected at times in their behavior. Court TV said that from a surface view, no one would have expected that Zamora and Graham would have become a lethal combination. Although they both continued to advance in the military, their single-minded quests for recognition covered up deep-rooted problems. According to Graham, he and Zamora planned to kill Adrian Jones and have sex with her dead body, and then put her in a lake with weights tied to her body. Graham called Adrian Jones on the night of December 3rd, 1995, and arranged to drive her to Joe Pool Lake, while Zamora hid in the hatchback of her car. Zamora said in her confession that they arrived at the spot by the lake after 12:30 a.m. on December 4th of 1995. She said that when Graham stopped the car, she came out from the hatchback and asked Adrian Jones whether she had had sex with Graham. She claimed Jones said that she had, but hadn't enjoyed it because she felt guilty. Zamora became enraged. Zamora and Graham both said in their confessions that they got into a struggle. Zamora hit Jones on the head with the weights, and Jones fought back. She got out of the car and ran into a field. Graham shot her twice with a 9mm handgun after she fell down. According to Zamora's confession, when he returned to the car, Graham said, "I love you, baby. Do you believe me now?" Shortly thereafter, Zamora asked what they had just done, to which David Graham answered, "I don't know. I can't believe we just did that." They cleaned up stood right over her, hitting her between the eyes. Her body was positively identified to be the missing Adrian Jones when the medical examiner received a photograph of Adrian. After the murder, Graham went to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and Zamora went to the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. While there, she confessed to the murder to her two roommates, who contacted the authorities at the academy. The Grand Prairie police were then contacted, and Zamora and Graham were arrested for capital murder on September 6th of 1996. They were held in the Tarrant County Jail. Graham was interrogated for 30 hours, during which he confessed to killing Adrian Jones. Zamora also confessed to the murder during her interrogation by the police. The key details of the event were similar. Each said that Jones was killed because Graham had had sex with her. She was taken to a remote lake, and she was hit over the head by Zamora and shot twice by Graham. Both later recanted their confessions. Graham said that he was not guilty of killing Jones, but helped cover up the murder, which he claimed Zamora committed by herself. Zamora claimed that Graham committed the murder by himself. A 9mm handgun, alleged to be the murder weapon, was found in the attic, which could be reached through David Graham's bedroom. The police had investigated the case for 9 months. Law enforcement officials associated with the case have stated that the sexual encounter between Graham and Jones did not happen, but was invented by Graham. Sergeant Alan Patton of the Grand Prairie Police Department stated, "For those who don't remember, this was a totally brutal, unnecessary murder. David Graham had lied to Zamora about an alleged sexual tryst that never happened with Adrian Jones. If he had said, 'I was just kidding, I was just trying to make you jealous,' Adrian Jones would still be alive today." However, Graham has since admitted that his original confession was accurate, and the only reason he lied about the sexual encounter not happening was because of his defense lawyer's advice. Zamora's 2-week trial began in February of 1998 in Fort Worth, and Judge Joe Drago presided. Linda Jones, Adrian's mother, asked that the death penalty be removed as a sentencing option from both trials. During the trial, Zamora admitted to being at the scene of the crime, but denied participating in the killing of Jones. The Naval Academy midshipman to whom Zamora confessed, and another witness stated that she showed no remorse over Adrian Jones's death. The case received national media attention, providing Court TV with some of its highest ratings ever in its film coverage of the trial. Some of the interest centered on whether Zamora was the submissive victim or the jealous driving force behind the murder. Under Texas law, murder is the intentional killing of another human being, while capital murder includes murder with an underlying felony of kidnapping, robbery, aggravated sexual assault, arson, or obstruction. In this case, the prosecutor believed that Adrian Jones was deceptively lured from her home by Graham, asking her for a bogus date, or she would not have been in the car. Moreover, the couple committed obstruction when Zamora allegedly ordered Graham to stalk Jones into the field and to shoot her so that she could not days. The jury was asked to deliberate on the charges of capital murder or the lesser charges of assault, kidnapping, or false imprisonment. On February 17th of 1998, after more than 6 hours of deliberations over 2 days, the jury found Zamora guilty of capital murder and the death of Adrian Jones. Because of the Joneses' family's request that prosecutors not seek the death penalty against her, Zamora received a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment and would be eligible for parole after 40 years. On July 24th of 1998, after a separate trial, a jury found Graham guilty of capital murder. During the trial, Wendy Bartlett, also on the track team, and coach Lee Ann Burke stated that Bartlett was the one who drove Adrian Jones home after the meet on November 4th, 1995, and that Graham had left earlier, leaving Jones and Bartlett to put away the equipment from the meet. Graham did not drive Adrian Jones home on the night he claimed to have had sex with her, lending credence to his later recantation. However, he ultimately refuted that his recantation, saying his lawyer had pressured him to lie, and again claimed to have had sex with Jones. Adding that to Zamora's story about Jones admitting to having had sex with Graham when Zamora asked her about it just before the murder, it might be that Graham and Jones had sex at some other time. He was also sentenced to life imprisonment. David Richards, Zamora's attorney, used the testimony from Bartlett and Burke as the basis of an appeal for Zamora. The petition made in 2005 stated that the prosecution withheld this information during Zamora's trial. From these witnesses, the state knew and should have known that the testimony is sponsored in support of a sexual encounter between Jones and Graham that was probably false. Due to the prominence of the case, in 2015, Tarrant County authorities choose to keep the paper court documents of this case as historical documents, even though they have been digitized. Get this, y'all. Zamora gets married while in jail. Zamora got to know Stephen Mora, a fellow Texas inmate, through the mail. He had committed auto theft and burglary and was in prison for threatening someone related to one of his cases. Although they never met in person, the two decided to get married and petitioned Bexar County for a marriage license in 2003. A wedding ceremony was performed on June 17th of 2003. Zamora's mother and a male friend stood in for the imprisoned couple in the county's first proxy marriage, which was performed by a judge in San Antonio. They were divorced in or around 2008. I guess so. You're both in prison, you've never met, and you're never gonna see each other. What in the fuck? Alright. Zamora was interviewed by Stone Phillips on Dateline in a show broadcast in April of 2007. Her appeals were exhausted, and with her lawyer's permission, she took a polygraph test administered by Dateline. Her news story was that Graham and she had been breaking up, and that Graham was using the murder to tie her to him. She noted that she obstructed justice by cleaning the car afterwards, and was an accessory after the fact. However, Zamora pointed out that the jury had convicted her of intending to kill Jones, which she denied. When she took the polygraph, the administrator she was nervous and hyperventilating, despite being told all the questions in advance and reviewing them with the administrator before the test. What do you guys think? Do you think she planned it as a jealous girlfriend? I don't know. Our final case is that of Carla Hughes. Carla Hughes is a former middle school teacher and murderer from Jackson, Mississippi, who was convicted of 2 counts of capital murder for the November 29th, 2006 slayings of her lover's pregnant fiancé, Avis Banks, and Banks's unborn child. She is serving 2 consecutive sentences of life without parole at the Central Mississippi Correctional Facility near Pearl, Mississippi. Carla Hughes was born on June 12th of 1981 and was adopted by her uncle Carl and Aunt Linda Hughes when she was 6 weeks old. She was raised in Greenville, Mississippi, and as a child, she excelled in horseback riding, beauty pageants, and was an honors student. Hughes earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Southern Mississippi in the early 2000s. In 2004, she gave birth to a son, and next earned her master education degree from Belhaven College in Jackson, Mississippi. Hughes started out her teaching career at an elementary school, but then took a job as a 7th grade language arts teacher. This is where she would meet fellow school teacher and basketball coach Keon Pittman, a graduate of Alcorn State University. The two began having an intimate relationship. At the same time, Pittman had a live-in fiancée, Avis Banks, who was pregnant. On the night of November 29th, 2006, Avis Banks, a daycare worker, was found shot and stabbed to death in the garage of her Ridgeland, Mississippi home. Her body was discovered by her fiancé, Keon Pittman, and it appeared as if the perpetrator had kicked in their back door. After discovering the body, Pittman called his coworker, Carla Hughes. Hughes was later interrogated by police, where she initially denied her sexual relationship with Pittman and later denied having access to a gun. However, Hughes's cousin indicated to police via an attorney that he had lent a loaded .38 caliber 5-shot revolver to Hughes shortly before the murder, and that she had returned the gun empty. Hughes was originally charged with accessory to murder after the fact, but on December 8th of 2006, the charges were upgraded to 2 counts of capital murder. Carla Hughes' trial began in October of 2009. Prosecutors believed that Hughes killed Avis Banks so that she could be with Pittman. Pittman testified for the prosecution on October 6th of 2009, stating to jurors how he found Avis's body in their garage and talked about his relationship with Hughes. In addition to Pittman's testimony, prosecutors were able to prove that Hughes' cousin's gun was the murder weapon, and that Hughes' shoes were used to kick in the door. Cell phone records also showed that Hughes was near Banks and Pittman's home at the time of the murder. Hughes' attorney called Pittman a bona fide womanizer who did not want to be married with a child. They claimed that he had worn Hughes' shoes during the murder, and he had discounted testimony about how Hughes' cell phone records placed her at the crime scene, claiming that she had a friend in the area. On October 12th of Hughes' jury announced they had reached a verdict. Hughes was found guilty on both counts of capital murder. Although Hughes could have faced the death penalty, she was instead sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without parole. On August 30th of 2010, a Madison County judge denied Carla Hughes' request for a new trial. And on June 21st of 2012, the Mississippi Supreme Court affirmed the judgment of the Madison County Circuit Court. 6 issues were raised on appeal, all of which were found to be without error. Oh, just kidding, guys. We actually have 4. I don't know why I forgot this. We have 4 stories. So this last one, this is truly our last one, is the murder of Mariah Wilson. On the night of May 11th, 2022, professional cyclist Anna Mariah Mo Wilson was fatally shot by Caitlin Marie Armstrong at a friend's home in Austin, Texas. Armstrong, a yoga instructor and licensed realtor, committed the crime out of jealousy, triggered by Wilson's romantic encounter with her on and off boyfriend, pro cyclist Colin Strickland. Prior to her conviction, Armstrong has had flight attempts both as a wanted person and as a detainee. She had spent 43 days at large until her capture in Costa Rica, where authorities said she used different names and changed her appearance to set up a new life, and would attempt to flee from custody on the eve of her trial over a year later. Anna Mariah Wilson was born on May 18th of 1996 in New Hampshire. She grew up in Kirby, Vermont, and she graduated Burke Mountain Academy in 2014 and went to Dartmouth College and received a bachelor's in engineering. Raised in a family of athletes, Wilson developed a passion for cycling as a young girl. She was a nationally ranked junior skier, but had become a gravel cyclist. Before her full-time career as a professional cyclist, she had worked as a demand planner. The perpetrator was Caitlin Armstrong, who grew up in Michigan and graduated high school in 2005 before attending Schoolcraft College in Michigan. She had been described as a yoga teacher and licensed realtor. Armstrong was in a relationship with professional cyclist Colin Strickland. They briefly separated in the fall of 2021, by which point Strickland had met Wilson and began a brief romantic relationship with her. Armstrong and Strickland would later reconcile and resume their relationship. On May 11th of 2022, Wilson was found dead with multiple gunshot wounds shortly before 10 p.m. at a friend's residence in Austin, Texas, where Wilson had been staying to compete in a race. Hours before her death, she had gone out with Strickland for a swim at the Deep Eddy Pool and afterward ate dinner. Strickland denied ever going inside Wilson's friend's house after dropping Wilson off and was ruled out as a suspect following a police investigation. An autopsy ruled Wilson's death as a homicide with 3 gunshot wounds, 2 in the head and 1 in the chest, that occurred after she was already laying on the floor, according to a search warrant. Police named Armstrong as a person of interest after video surveillance showed her black Jeep Grand Cherokee arriving at the Austin residence moments before the killing. She was taken into custody over an outstanding misdemeanor warrant for theft She turned her head and rolled her eyes in an angry manner when questioned about how Wilson was with Strickland. She was released on a technicality stemming from discrepancies between her date of birth in the police department's database and the one on the warrant. Police examined Wilson's phone and concluded she was romantically tied to Strickland while he was still dating Armstrong. Strickland originally denied knowing the victim when first interviewed, but eventually admitted to the relationship and keeping communication with Wilson hidden from Armstrong, going so far as to delete text messages from Wilson on his phone while saving her phone number under a pseudonym. Armstrong reportedly became aware of the relationship and expressed a strong desire to kill Wilson, telling an anonymous tipster that she had either recently purchased a firearm or was going to. Strickland revealed he had bought 2 handguns for Armstrong and himself. Through a search warrant, police recovered 2 firearms from the house Strickland shared with Armstrong. A spent shell casing from one weapon, a 6-hour P365 handgun belonging to Armstrong, yielded a significant match with the one found in the crime scene. The search warrant also revealed that Armstrong had visited a shooting range with her sister Christine to learn how to use a firearm. On May 17th, an arrest warrant for first-degree murder was issued for Caitlin Armstrong. Armstrong used her sister's passport to fly to Costa Rica. She assumed fake identities and changed her appearance through plastic surgery. U.S. Marshals located her by placing an ad on Facebook looking for a yoga instructor. After spending 43 days at large, Armstrong was apprehended in a hostel in Santa Teresa, Costa Rica, on June 29th of 2022. In a press conference about Armstrong's capture, the U.S. Marshals said that she had fled to Costa Rica and sought opportunities to teach yoga under a variety of aliases. Whew, I'm struggling, y'all. They observed that her appearance had changed drastically. Her hair had been dyed and cut short, her nose had been bandaged, and there was some discoloration around her eyes, which she reportedly said were caused by a surfboarding accident. Armstrong was arraigned on July 21st of 2022, pleading not guilty to the murder charge. She was held on a $3.5 million bond in Travis County Jail. After suffering delays, the case went to trial on October 30th of 2023. Armstrong had lost her bid to suppress evidence of her custodial interrogation with the Austin Police Department, which she argued was illegally obtained because she was not apprised of her Miranda warning. A federal charge of unlawful flight to avoid prosecution against her was provisionally dismissed as well. Legal experts said such a motion was routine since she had a constitutional right to a speedy trial. On October 12th of 2023, Armstrong escaped from the officers who had escorted her to a medical appointment outside of the jail. She was reapprehended after a brief chase. She was charged with escape causing bodily injury, and the charges were later dropped. On November 16th of 2023, Armstrong was found guilty of first-degree murder. expenses, as well as emotional damages they suffered as a result of Wilson's death. The lawsuit will also prevent Armstrong from profiting financially from her crime. On June 17th of 2024, the judge ordered Armstrong to pay $15 million to the Wilson family. Where the hell is she going to come up with $15 million? She's in jail. What did you guys think of these cases? Have you ever been so batshit crazy about somebody that you even consider, one of these wild crimes? I don't know, y'all. I mean, I always say people are wild on this channel, and they really are. I hope you guys all had a wonderful holiday season and that you have started off the new year healthy